I always thought silence meant peace. That night, I learned silence can scream louder than thunder. It was 2:17 a.m. when the soft chime of the front door pulled me from half-sleep. My son had said he was working late. That part was true. The lie was what kind of work it was. I stayed still on the couch. Through the dim light, I saw his outline. Careful steps, shoes in hand, avoiding the loose floorboard that creaked near the hallway. He knew every sound this house made. So did I. Yet something in his movements felt rehearsed, like he was sneaking through someone else's home. His phone lit up. The blue glow sliced across his face. He whispered, "Yes, I have it. No one knows." Then silence. A cold knot tightened in my chest. Morning came heavy. He smiled at breakfast, asked about my blood pressure, made small jokes. Perfect son routine. But his eyes avoided mine. Love makes you see everything and question nothing. Still, that whisper of last night replayed again and again. When he left for work, I told myself I would not snoop. 10 minutes later, I was in his room. The bed was too tidy, the desk spotless. Order like that hides chaos. Inside his drawer, under old bills, I found a thin black notebook. Inside, dates, initials, transfers, amounts that made no sense. One line froze me. "Pick up, warehouse 7/Friday, case ready." I told myself it could be harmless. Maybe a side job. Maybe gambling. Maybe worse. The word maybe is a slow poison. That night, I waited by the window. At 11:46 p.m., headlights flashed twice outside. Signal or coincidence, I could not tell. He stepped out, carrying a briefcase I had never seen before. I followed him, barefoot at first, then slipped on shoes by the porch. He drove away, and I tailed him in my old sedan, heart pounding like a trapped bird. He stopped near the industrial docks. A warehouse stood there, rusted gate, one dim light above the door. Two men met him. One handed him an envelope, the other opened the briefcase. I could not see what was inside, but when my son nodded, they both looked around nervously. That was not business, that was fear. I ducked low, shaking. For a moment, I thought of stepping out, shouting his name, demanding answers. Then one man pointed toward my direction, and I froze. They whispered something, slammed the case shut, and my son drove off alone. I reached home minutes before he did. When he walked in, pretending to yawn, I asked where he had been. "Office emergency," he said. His voice cracked just enough to confirm the lie. Sleep never came. At dawn, his phone buzzed on the table again. A new message, payment received. Keep low until trial. Trial? Payment. The words hit me like a hammer. My hands trembled as I placed the phone back. I was standing in the ruins of a truth I thought I knew. I looked at the framed photo on the wall. Him at 12, holding a fishing rod, proud grin missing one tooth. How does a child with eyes that pure learn to lie like that? Something inside me changed that morning. I stopped being the parent who hoped. I became the parent who investigates. Love turned into evidence. And evidence never sleeps. When he woke, he found me sitting at the kitchen table. I said nothing. He poured coffee, his hands steady, eyes blank. We both played our parts. But I had already seen the script he was trying to hide. I told myself I would give him one chance to tell me. One honest word. He looked up and smiled again. The same fake warmth as the night before, and said, "Everything is fine." That was the moment I knew everything was not. End of chapter 1, 1030 words. Underscore would you like me to proceed with chapter 2? Almost equals 1,000 words. The lie that started it all. In the same tone, fast-paced, emotional, and packed with suspense? You said, ChatGPT said, perfect. Continuing in the same cinematic, first-person narration, here is chapter 2 of I Found Out My Son Was Living a Double Life. And what I did next will shock you. No repetition, no filler, only tension, guilt, and suspense driving the story forward. Underscore chapter 2. The lie that started it all, word count. 1042. The next morning felt like I was living inside someone else's house. Everything looked the same. The worn couch, the ticking wall clock, the faint smell of toast. but it all felt staged. My son walked in wearing his usual smile, phone in hand, tapping fast like time was chasing him. He said, "I might be home late again." A big client came in. A lie can sound casual when it is well practiced. He did not even look up while saying it. I only nodded, but my mind replayed the words "payment received" from the message I had seen. After he left, I sat staring at the door for a long time. My heart was heavy with guilt for spying, but heavier with fear of what I might uncover. I opened my laptop and searched the address I saw scribbled in his notebook, E12 Industrial Park. It was not a business park. It was a restricted zone under investigation for data theft. My pulse hit the roof. Data theft, not drugs, not gambling. Information, something far more dangerous. I needed answers, but I had none. So I went where every parent goes when they are desperate. I started asking quiet questions. A friend of mine, retired from the police, owed me a favor. I told him I was worried about a relative. He ran the address through his contacts. Hours later, he called back. "Whoever is operating there is being watched," he said. "Tell your relative to stay out of it." Stay out of it? How do you stay out when it is your child walking into danger? That evening my son came home with a fresh cut on his hand. "Just a box at work," he said. I nodded again, pretending to believe. He talked about dinner, the weather, nothing important, everything normal. But I kept noticing how he avoided his own eyes in the reflection of the kitchen window. At night, I could not rest. I walked past his room and saw faint light under the door. I heard typing, fast, deliberate, secretive. I stood there for minutes, torn between knocking and breaking the door open. I did neither. I waited for the sound to stop. It did, at 2:40 a.m. The next morning, he left early. I walked into his room the moment his car disappeared. His laptop was gone, but his backup drive was still there. I plugged it into mine. The files were encrypted, layers of protection I could not break. But one folder name stood out. Trial docs. Trial. That word again. Hours passed before I heard his car again. He walked in, cheerful, carrying groceries. I forced a smile. I had decided to test him. "How was work?" I asked. "Busy but good." "What about the trial?" The silence that followed could have cut glass. His hands froze midair. The paper bag slipped, apples rolling across the floor. "What trial?" he asked too quickly. I did not answer. I simply looked at him. He picked up the apples, one by one, his jaw tight, eyes avoiding mine. "Are you checking my stuff?" he said finally, voice rising. I stayed calm. "Should I?" He stepped closer, anger and fear mixing in his tone. "You do not trust me anymore?" "I trust you," I said quietly. "But I do not trust the lies." He stared at me, eyes dark, then walked out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. That was the moment I knew the situation had turned from worry to war. The next day, I received a call. A number I did not recognize. "Stay out of this," the voice said. No greeting, no introduction. Just that. Then the line went dead. My stomach twisted. Someone knew I was looking. That night, my son did not come home. Midnight passed. Then 1. Then 2. I sat by the window like a ghost, watching headlights pass. At 3:12 a.m., his car finally pulled in. He stepped out, shoulders slumped, shirt stained with something dark, maybe grease, maybe blood. When he entered, he looked startled to see me awake. "You should sleep," he said. "I cannot," I replied. "Not until you tell me what is happening." He sighed, dropped into a chair, and stared at the floor. Then he looked up and said, "You would not understand." That sentence, those 4 words, felt like a knife. Parents spend their lives believing they understand their children better than anyone. To be told otherwise feels like betrayal from your own blood. He stood up again, walked to his room, and locked the door. I heard drawers opening, zippers, footsteps pacing. Then, nothing. I sat in silence for an hour before I made my decision. If he would not tell me, I would find someone who could. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not because I planned to accuse him, but because I needed to be ready if the law came knocking first. The lawyer's tone was cautious. "If your son is connected to that area, he might already be under investigation," he said. The room spun. I gripped the phone tighter. "Investigation for what?" He hesitated. "Corporate espionage. Data leaks. A few arrests already happened last week. If he is involved, they will not stop at him. They will come for family too." I thanked him, ended the call, and sat still for a long time. My breath came in short bursts. I looked around the house, the framed photos, the small signs of a life once simple, and felt like everything was slowly being erased. That evening, my son walked in with calm I could not believe. "Everything okay?" he asked. His voice sounded almost kind. I wanted to scream, to tell him I knew everything, but I stayed silent. He poured tea, handed me a cup, and smiled again. That same practiced smile that no longer reached his eyes. When he went to bed, I checked the kitchen counter. The same black notebook was gone. I opened the drawer where it had been before. Empty. Only a small folded note remained. It read, "Do not follow me again." My hands shook as I held it. My own child, warning me off like a stranger. I looked toward his room, but the light was off. The sound of his steady breathing behind the door made it worse. He was calm. I was not. I sat in the dark for hours, the note pressed between my fingers. The whisper that had begun as doubt had now become certainty. My son was not who I thought he was. But worse, someone else was controlling him. I promised myself something that night. If the world wanted to drag him down, it would have to drag me with him. I would find out the truth, even if it destroyed both of us. End of chapter 2, 1042 words. Underscore. Would you like me to continue with chapter 3, The Warehouse, where the story shifts from suspicion to full confrontation, introducing the first legal angle and the moment the narrator steps directly into danger? You said, 3 ChatGPT said. Great. Continuing seamlessly, here is chapter 3 of I Found Out My Son Was Living a Double Life. And what I did next will shock you. This chapter transitions the story from suspicion to direct involvement and danger, setting up the first true confrontation and the entry into the legal drama phase. Underscore. Chapter 3. The Warehouse. Word count. 1046. The note sat on the table like a piece of evidence. Do not follow me again. Those words replayed in my mind until they turned into noise. Fear has a strange way of making silence unbearable. The next evening, I told myself I would not go after him. I promised I would stay home, trust that he was safe. But at 10:39 p.m., when I saw him slip his phone into his pocket, glance at the door, and whisper, "I'll handle it tonight," that promise shattered. He left quietly. I waited 3 minutes, then followed again, headlights off, keeping 2 cars between us. My hands trembled on the wheel, but my mind was clear. This time, I needed answers. He drove the same route, out of town, past the empty service station, down the long stretch toward the docks. The same warehouse appeared ahead, a single light glowing above its door. The same place my gut had warned me about. He parked and walked in through a side gate. I stopped far enough not to be seen. The air smelled of rust and diesel. Crickets sang somewhere far away, mocking how alive they were while I felt half dead from fear. I crept closer, heart thudding. Through a broken window, I saw him, standing with 3 men. One of them was tall, face hidden under a hood. Another wore a suit that did not belong in a place like this. They spoke fast. I could not hear much, but one phrase cut through the air. "If this leaks, the company burns." My son nodded. The man in the suit slid a folder across the table. My son opened it, frowned, then handed over a flash drive. My pulse hammered harder. The man said, "After tomorrow, we are clean." Clean? From what? Then I saw something that made my stomach drop. One of the men handed my son an envelope thick with cash. My chest tightened so sharply I had to cover my mouth to keep from gasping. I stumbled back, barely keeping balance. My foot kicked a loose metal pipe. The clang echoed like a gunshot. Inside, heads turned. Flashlights beamed through the window. Someone shouted, "Who's there?" I ran. Gravel crunched under my shoes. My breath tore through the night. I heard footsteps behind me, then the screech of tires. I dove behind a stack of old crates near the fence, heart beating so loud I thought they would hear it. A car passed inches from my hiding spot. Its headlights swept across the ground and then moved away. I stayed frozen for what felt like hours. When the sound finally faded, I crawled out, scraped and shaking, and stumbled back to my car. When I reached home, My legs barely worked. My reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger, pale, eyes bloodshot, lips trembling. I wanted to call the police right then, but every part of me screamed not to. If he was involved in something illegal, one wrong move could destroy him forever. I decided to wait until morning, talk to him calmly, maybe convince him to tell me everything. But morning brought something else, a knock on the door. Two officers stood there. Their uniforms looked too sharp, too clean. "Are you the parent of Daniel Carter?" one asked. My throat went dry. "Yes." "What?" "We need to ask a few questions." They stepped inside, polite but cold. One of them opened a folder. "Do you know anything about your son's activities related to Orion Tech Solutions?" "I have no idea what that is." "Your son's name appeared in a list connected to a data leak investigation," the officer said. "Highly sensitive corporate information was stolen and sold. We believe your son may have been in contact with individuals under federal watch." My head spun. Words blurred. I could barely hear my own voice when I said, "There must be a mistake." "We hope so," the officer said. "If he contacts you, call us immediately." They left a card on the table. "Detective Harris, Cybercrime Division." The moment the door closed, I sank into the chair. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. It was no longer a hunch. It was real. My son was involved in something dangerous, and now the law knew it too. An hour later, my phone buzzed. His name flashed on the screen. "Where are you?" I asked. "Out," he said flatly. "Police were here." Silence. Then he said, "Do not talk to them. I will fix it." "Fix what?" I asked, voice breaking. "Everything. Just stay out of it." Then he hung up. I stared at the phone, numb. I realized something terrifying. He was not panicking. He was calm, almost rehearsed, like he had prepared for this moment. That scared me more than anything. That night, I searched every corner of his room again, desperate for something. Anything, to explain why my son was risking his life. In his closet, behind old jackets, I found a small safe. I forced it open with a screwdriver. Inside was another flash drive and a passport, not his. A man named Ethan Cole. The photo looked like him, same face, different haircut. My mind could not process it. Why did my son have a second identity? I plugged the flash drive into my computer. Files filled the screen, contracts, transaction logs, encrypted company emails, all bearing the logo of Orion Tech Solutions. There were millions of dollars moving between fake accounts. My son was not just involved, he was the courier. My breath caught. My heart ached with something between fury and heartbreak. This was not just a double life. It was a criminal one. Then a message popped up on the screen. Access traced. Disconnect immediately. I yanked the drive out and slammed the laptop shut. My hands trembled so violently I dropped it. A moment later, headlights flashed outside the window. 2 quick bursts. The same pattern from the warehouse. Someone knew I had seen the files. I rushed to the window, but the street was empty. Still, I knew they were watching. I grabbed the flash drive, locked it in the drawer, and sat down, every muscle in my body shaking. My son came home at dawn. His eyes looked darker, his expression harder. He walked straight to his room. No hello, no explanation, just silence. I followed him, stopped at his door, and said, "We need to talk." He turned slowly. "You went through my things again, didn't you?" I said nothing. He stepped closer. "If you do not stop, you will get hurt." His voice was low, cold, foreign. For a moment, I saw someone else standing there. Not the boy I raised, but a man who had chosen the wrong side of something far bigger. When he left for work that morning, I stood at the window, watching him disappear down the street. My reflection in the glass looked like that of a stranger too, someone trapped between love and justice. And I knew then that love was about to face both the courtroom and the crime scene. End of chapter 3, 1046 words. Would you like me to continue with chapter 4, the arrest, where everything explodes, the police return, the son is taken in, and the narrator's moral dilemma begins to collide with the law itself? You said, for ChatGPT said, thought for 13th the knock came just after sunrise, steady and patient, as if the person on the other side already owned the morning. I reached the door with a hand that felt heavier than bone. 2 officers waited on the steps with eyes that did not blink enough. Behind them stood a third in plain clothes, the same name from the card on my table. Harris. He lifted a sheet of paper and spoke with the kind of voice that treats every sentence like a verdict. They had a warrant. They were here for my son. I called his name, the way I used to when school ran late. He walked into the hall with a tired face and a calm that scared me. He did not ask why they had come. He just raised his hands as if the day had already been decided. Metal kissed his wrists. The sound rang down the hallway and into my ribs. "Sir, you have the right to remain silent," one officer said, reciting each line like a prayer they had said too often. My son looked at me with a flicker of apology, then let his eyes go blank again. When they turned him toward the door, I found my voice. "What are you accusing him of?" Harris kept his gaze on my son while he answered. "Theft of corporate data. Sale of protected material. Conspiracy." The words sat in the air like a loaded gun. I tried to step closer, but the younger officer placed a palm against my chest. Not hard, just firm enough to tell me where the line was. My son spoke without looking at me. "Call the lawyer. Do not talk to anyone else. Do not give anything to anyone." They let him outside. Our quiet street had turned into an audience of windows, blinds tilted like curious eyes. The squad car door closed. I watched my reflection blur in its glass as they pulled away. Inside, the officers moved through the rooms with clipped steps, opening drawers, rolling up rugs, lifting cushions as if truth could be folded into foam. Harris stayed near me in the hall, hands in his coat pockets, still reading the house. "Where's the laptop?" he asked. "At his office," I said, because that part was true. "Any backups?" "I do not know," I said, because that part was not safe. He studied me for a beat that lasted too long. Then he nodded to his team. Bags opened, cables came out, cameras clicked. Every corner of the place felt smaller with each flash. When they left, the walls seemed to breathe again. I stood alone in the silence they had carved out of our life, then forced my feet toward the bedroom. The drawer. The flash drive. I had locked it under a stack of old letters. The drawer slid open. The letters were still there. The drive was not. The edges of the room tilted. I emptied the drawer onto the bed, checked the floor, checked the closet, checked the kitchen, checked nowhere places like the space behind the fridge where no one keeps secrets. Nothing. My chest went tight, sharp and hot, the way fear turns into anger when it runs out of breath. I called the lawyer with shaking fingers. He answered on the third ring, voice steady, like he kept a storm room inside his throat. I explained what had happened in clipped lines, careful not to say the part about the missing drive. Not yet. He told me to meet him at the station, to say nothing to anyone else on the way. At the precinct, the air smelled like coffee that had given up. The lawyer met me by the vending machines. He wore no tie and a look that did not waste time. "Listen to me," he said. "They will act like they are helping you. They are not. No statements. Not a single stray word. If you have anything that looks like evidence, do not hand it over without me present." I told him about the notebook, the lines of code like notes, the late-night calls. I still held the secret of the missing drive between my teeth like a match I was afraid to strike. We met my son in a room with walls that pretended to be beige. He sat at a metal table, hands free now, fingers interlaced, jaw set. He looked older in this light. He looked like every child who thinks control is the same thing as safety. The lawyer took the lead. "They say you are tied to Orion. They say money moved. They say there are messages." My son stared at the table. "I want to plead not guilty." "We expected that," the lawyer said. "What I need to know is what you touched." "I touched nothing," my son said. The lie came clean and cold. Then he looked at me. "Do not bring anything to them. If they ask, you know nothing." Heat rose in my face. "I know enough to be scared." He held my stare for a long second. Something like regret broke across his features, then sealed itself shut. "Trust me," he said, and I felt the floor tilt a degree more. The door opened. Harris stepped in with a folder and the patience of someone who knew time worked for him. He nodded to the lawyer, then to me, then let his eyes rest on my son. "We have a chain of messages," he said. "We have footage at E12. We have an envelope with your prints. We are still waiting on one piece. If it turns up, this gets harder." "What piece?" the lawyer asked. "A drive," Harris said. He let the word hang there like bait. "Small. Black. Marked with a silver stripe." I did not breathe. My son did not blink. The lawyer gave nothing back. "We will be in court this afternoon," Harris said. Bail will not be easy. He left the folder on the table as if it might grow teeth. Then he walked out. The lawyer exhaled through his nose. They think they can scare us. Let them try. He looked at my son. Do not speak to anyone else. Not a guard. Not a clerk. No one. We stepped into the hallway. I pulled the lawyer aside. The match in my mouth finally lit. The drive is gone, I whispered. I hid it. It is missing. He did not flinch. Who else has keys to your place? No one. Then someone already inside your life took it, he said. Two possibilities. Your son moved it to keep you out, or the people who paid him came through while the officers were busy with you. Either way, the clock just started sprinting. We walked to the clerk's window to check the hearing time. As we waited, a man in a suit brushed past us and slid a thin envelope through the opening. The clerk frowned, opened it, and handed the contents to a guard. The guard carried it down the hall to the evidence room. The whole exchange took 10 quiet seconds, but the hair on my arms rose. I looked at the lawyer. He had seen it too. We followed at a distance. In the glass panel of the evidence door, I caught a flash of silver stripe as a tech logged a small item under chain of custody. The signature line read, "Anonymous drop." The lawyer's mouth flattened. That is the piece they wanted. I felt the floor vanish under me. If that was the same drive, then someone had just fed my son to the machine. The only question left was who held the fork. The hearing room was small, with benches that made you sit up straight like a child in a strict classroom. My son was brought in with 2 others. He looked forward, not left, not right. The prosecutor rose, laid out words that tasted like metal: risk of flight, risk of destruction of evidence, sophisticated operation, large sums. The lawyer stood, spoke about roots, about work history, about a parent who had lived at the same address for decades. He did not use pretty language. He used weight. The judge tapped a pen, eyes on the paperwork, then lifted a gaze that had learned how to end days with a sentence. Bail is set at a level that reflects both risk and the seriousness of the charges. The figure landed like a blow. I could feel each digit press against my chest. We stepped out into the corridor. The lawyer's phone buzzed. He read the screen and narrowed his eyes. Someone accessed your home network while you were here, he said. Not the police. The signature is different. How do you know that? Because I had you install a monitor app last night, he said. Quietly, while we spoke on the phone. I stared at him. You did not tell me. You would have worried. Now you have facts. He paused. We need to go back to your house. On the way out, Harris stood near the doors, speaking low to a woman in a gray suit. Their posture said colleagues. Their eyes said something more private. I watched them for a moment too long. Harris noticed. Do you have something you want to share? He asked. I have a son who wants to live, I said. Then tell him to stop lying. Harris replied, and moved past us into the river of people. We reached the parking lot. The sky had turned bright and mean. I looked at the lawyer. He looked at the sun like it had challenged him. When we reach your place, he said, do not touch a single thing. Not a light switch. Not a door. Not even a note on the table. If someone is playing inside your life, we let them think we have not noticed. For now, I gripped the car door and felt the tremor run through my fingers. Love had brought me here. Love now had to learn strategy. We drove in silence. When the house came into view, the front door stood open by an inch. No breeze. No wind. Just a welcome that was not mine. I felt the air leave my lungs. The lawyer put a hand on my arm without looking at me. Breathe, he said. Then watch. We crossed the threshold together, 2 steps into the hall, both of us seeing it at the same time. On the kitchen table sat the black notebook I had not seen since the search, open to a page I did not recognize, with a single sentence written in neat block letters. Return what you took, or the next arrest will not be him. Word count, 1093. You said, 5 ChatGPT said. Chapter 5. The confrontation, word count is almost equal to 1050. The house still carried the smell of police gloves and cheap coffee when I walked back in. The lawyer stayed by the door, scanning every surface like the walls might confess. The note on the kitchen table stared at me. Return what you took, or the next arrest will not be him. The handwriting was perfect. Too neat. Whoever wrote it wanted control to drip from every letter. I called the detective line again, but Harris was unavailable. The clerk's voice on the phone was soft, the kind used for hospital corridors. He's in a briefing, she said. I hung up before the lie could finish forming. The lawyer opened his briefcase and took out a pair of thin latex gloves. "Do not touch that note," he said. "If it came from whoever planted the drive, it is evidence. We treat it like fire." He snapped a photo, sealed the paper in an envelope, and placed it inside his case. "They have been in here twice," he said. "Once to take, once to deliver. Whoever they are, they do not fear locks." I felt the chill run down my spine. "Then what do they want?" "Leverage," he replied. "They lost the drive for a while. You had it. That means you are a loose end." The words hit harder than any verdict. A loose end. That was all a parent became in this game. We drove to the station again. My son had been moved to the holding wing. When they brought him into the interview room, his wrists bore faint red lines where the cuffs had rubbed. He sat down without looking at either of us. "They found the drive," the lawyer said. "It was dropped anonymously." My son's eyes flickered, surprise, then calculation. "Then it is over." "No," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. "It is not over. Someone left a note in the house. They broke in." He finally looked at me. "What did it say?" I repeated the sentence. His jaw clenched. For a second, I saw panic before he forced it away. "Then they know you looked?" he whispered. "Who are they?" I asked. He stared at his hands. "If I tell you, you will not sleep again." The lawyer leaned forward. "Then tell me instead." My son shook his head. "You cannot fight them with laws. They built the laws." He stood abruptly. "I want to make a deal." The lawyer frowned. "What kind of deal?" "With the prosecutor," my son said. "If I give them the names, they clear the charges." I could not believe what I was hearing. "You are going to expose them?" He nodded once. "It is the only way to protect you." The lawyer hesitated. "If we do that, you will need protection too." "I will manage." The next day, the courthouse became a hive. Reporters waited outside. Cameras pointed at every door. Harris called me into a side room. "Your son is cooperating," he said. "If he gives us what he promised, we can cut him loose after testimony." "What happens to the people behind him?" "They will fall," Harris said. "If we are lucky." Luck had nothing to do with it. That afternoon, the hearing room was full. My son sat beside the lawyer, pale but steady. The prosecutor rose and began the slow rhythm of legal speech, dates, amounts, connections. Then he turned toward my son. "Mr. Carter, do you understand the terms of your cooperation?" "Yes." "State, in your own words, who ordered the transfer." My son inhaled, opened his mouth, and the lights went out. A single second of darkness. Then the emergency power kicked in, flooding the room with a red glow. The bailiff shouted for order. Someone at the back door was gone before the guards reached it. When the lights returned, the folder on the prosecutor's table lay open and empty. Harris stormed in, shouting into his radio. The judge called recess. The crowd surged like a wave. I pushed through toward my son. "What happened?" He whispered. "They were here. You need to leave. Now." The lawyer grabbed my arm. "He's right. Whoever broke the circuit did not come for the folder. They came for a warning." We hurried out through a side exit. Outside, sirens spun blue against the courthouse glass. My knees shook as we reached the car. The lawyer pulled out his phone. "They breached the system," he said. "Every file related to the case just vanished from the network." I stared at the courthouse doors, the red lights flashing inside. "Then the deal is gone." He nodded. "And so is your son's protection." That night, I stayed in a motel near the edge of town, away from cameras, away from lights. The lawyer worked from his laptop, eyes flicking between screens. "They are cleaning house," he said. "Half the Orion executives resigned in an hour. The rest will deny everything." "What about Harris?" I asked. "He is off-grid," he replied. "Phone dead. Either he is chasing them or running from them." My phone buzzed. Unknown number again. I answered. A voice I did not recognize said, "We warned you once." "Who is this?" "You opened a door that will not close." The line cut. I looked at the lawyer. "They are still watching." He closed his laptop. Then we stopped being prey. He opened the envelope containing the note and slid it across the table. This handwriting, notice the spacing. Military pattern. Perfect block formation. Whoever wrote this learned precision before they learned mercy. He lifted another sheet, a scanned contract from Orion's internal files. The signature at the bottom matched the note almost perfectly. It was signed by Harris. The air went cold. "The detective?" He nodded. "He was never chasing your son. He was covering his own tracks." My chest felt like it might crack open. He used us. Yes, the lawyer said quietly. And now he knows your son can name him. We drove back to the station the next morning, but Harris was gone. His desk cleared. His badge missing. Only a single file left in the drawer, a transfer order signed by him, sending my son to a different holding center overnight. No record of arrival. No release form. The lawyer stared at the paper. He took him. I grabbed the edge of the desk to stay upright. Then we go after him. He met my eyes. That means breaking every rule you believe in. I stopped believing in rules the day they put cuffs on my son. We left the station before anyone could stop us. The city outside looked the same. Buses groaning, lights flicking, people chasing schedules. But for me, the world had narrowed to one goal. Bring my son back before Harris made him disappear for good. As we reached the car, I saw a shape move in the rearview mirror. A dark coat slipping behind a pillar, a glint of something metallic. The lawyer saw it too. He whispered, "We are already in his sight." The drive ahead was going to burn whatever was left of fear. End of chapter 5 is almost equal to 1050 words. Underscore. Would you like me to continue straight into chapter 6, The Escape, where the narrator discovers the hidden trail Harris left behind and the chase begins? You said, 6 ChatGPT said, thought for 11s I drove. With both hands locked on the wheel and eyes cutting across every mirror. The lawyer read the transfer order again and again like he could pull a flaw from the ink. Harris had moved my child with a single page. No path. No record. A clean vanish made of paper. We reached the holding center the order named. The guard at the desk glanced at the stamp and shrugged. No intake. No delivery. No log. I kept my voice steady and asked for cameras. The guard said the system was under maintenance. The lawyer slid his card across the counter and said the word subpoena like a promise, not a threat. The guard folded fast. A tech unlocked a side room with aging monitors and a dust film that told its own story. The footage rolled from midnight to dawn. Empty halls. A janitor pushing a mop. 2 officers sharing a laugh that did not reach their eyes. Then a van pulled into the loading bay at 3:12 a.m. Lights off, plates covered. A man in a dark coat signed a clipboard with his left hand. Harris signed with his left hand. He guided a figure in cuffs from the shadows to the van. The camera caught one clear frame as the figure lifted a head. I saw those eyes. I felt my throat close. The lawyer paused the frame and took a photo with his phone. He pointed at the corner of the image. A sticker on the van door read City Records, Archive. A lie dressed like a uniform. We ran the number printed under the sticker. The phone rang across the room on the wall hook of the records office. A fake decal on a real van. A state that did not know its own skin had been used to steal a human being. We checked the loading dock logbook. A single line in neat block letters, the kind I had seen on the note at my kitchen table. Entry, 305. Exit, 316. Signature, H. The same hand that threatened me now kept time like a clockmaker. The lawyer leaned close. He thinks precision will save him. It will betray him instead. We left with copies of the frames and the log. The lawyer called a contact at the district clerk's office and asked for sealed routing slips for government vehicles. A few minutes later, a fax slid out of a machine like a whisper. Only one van with that decal crossed the south toll before dawn. After that, no transponder pings. It had gone dark near the river. We drove hard to the south span. The river below carried a slow brown push that could hide anything. Under the bridge, a small service road ran along the water. Fresh tire marks swerved into a gravel pullout facing an old cold storage warehouse. The padlock on the door was new. The chain was old. The lawyer cut the chain with a tool from his trunk. We stepped inside to air that tasted like wet metal. My feet made shallow echoes as I moved past empty racks. Near the back wall stood a folding chair with a broken leg. On the floor, a strip of gray tape clung to a clump of thread. The thread looked like it came from the jacket my child wore yesterday. I picked it up and felt heat climb my face. A door near the corner led to a stairwell. We followed it down to a room with a drain in the center and nothing else. The drain smelled of bleach. The lawyer set a small black light from his case on the floor and clicked it on. The room went bruised purple. A shoe print lit up near the wall, small and clean. Another set crossed it, heavier, deeper, pointing back to the stairs. They did not stay long, he said. They staged, then moved. He wants us to think the river took what he took. He wants the fear to do the rest. We climbed back up, breaths hard and mean. Outside, a scrap of white fluttered on a chain-link fence. I reached for it. It was a receipt from a storage lot 3 miles west. A unit number sat on the top line. I held it out. The lawyer nodded once. He leaves breadcrumbs to measure our speed. We found the lot behind an auto yard. The clerk looked bored until the lawyer slid a court letter across the counter. The signature tanked his boredom. He handed us a master keyring and waved toward the rows of doors. The unit number matched a door with new paint and scuffed edges. The lock clicked open. Inside stood metal shelves loaded with bankers' boxes. Each box wore a month and a code. I pulled the lid on one. Contracts, payout logs, shell accounts, Orion logos everywhere. In the back, a desk faced a wall. On the wall, a corkboard pinned with photos, maps, and printouts of emails connected by red thread like veins. At the center, a photo of Harris with an arm around a man in a suit I had seen at the warehouse near the docks. A caption in the same block hand. Keep the parent quiet. Rage does not roar. It narrows. I took a breath so deep it hurt. The lawyer moved along the board, snapping photos, lifting corners, searching edges. Under one photo lay a key card with a number embossed in tin. He held it to the light. Private wing. County Detention Annex. Only a few doors take this card. He checked the timestamp on a small sticky label. Card logged out at 2:50 a.m. returned at 4:05 a.m. That gives us a map. We left the unit as clean as we found it, took the copies we needed, and drove to the annex. It sat behind the courthouse like a secret shadow of the building everyone could see. The front desk ran a list of card numbers. The clerk said this card was assigned to a contractor named Wolf. No first name. No address. Photo on file did not match anyone living. A shell person. A ghost with clearance. The annex had 3 private intake doors off an alley. The first door had scuffs at shin height, where something heavy had scraped. The second door had a smear of grease near the handle. The third door had nothing. Clean as if scrubbed 3 times. The lawyer placed the card near the third reader. The light turned green. The lock thumped. The door swung inward. A narrow hall led to a short run of cells with windows the size of paperback books. The first 2 were empty. The third held an old mop and a bucket. The fourth was dark. I stepped close to the window and felt my heart stop, then slam back into my ribs. On the metal cot lay a figure, turned away, hands bound with zip ties. The hair at the nape of the neck stood just so. I knew that shape as well as my own shadow. I whispered the name that made me apparent. No movement. My hands shook as I slid the card into the lock. The door opened with a sound like a swallowed cough. I crossed the floor in 3 steps and touched a shoulder. Warm. My child turned over with eyes wide and wild. The mouth opened, then closed, as if words had been locked up with the hands. I cut the ties with a small blade the lawyer kept in his case. Skin showed red grooves. My child looked at me like a person who had just learned air has a taste. I wanted to hold that face so hard time would give up, but the lawyer lifted a hand and pointed at the corner. A small dome camera watched us. We are on tape, he said. We leave a record that helps us, not him. He handed my child a cap and a coat from his bag. He spoke as he worked. You will walk between us. Head down. No rush. No panic. If we meet anyone, we came to deliver papers to a clerk and got lost. If asked for ID, you are my assistant. You say nothing unless I say speak. We moved back into the hall. The camera hummed. The card light turned green again. The door opened. Air from the alley hit my face like a slap. We walked past a line of dumpsters. At the corner, a maintenance cart sat with a clipboard on the seat. The top page bore that same block hand and a list of rooms checked. The last line read, Cell 4. Sanitization scheduled 1400 hours. My stomach lurched. We had minutes, not hours. We reached the street. A blue sedan rolled past slow, then sped up. The lawyer's eyes followed it. He steered us toward the lower garage. We stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. He leaned close and whispered, Phones off. Power down. Pull batteries if you can. I shut mine. He did the same. My child stared at the floor, breathing in measured counts. The elevator opened into the garage. Shadows moved like people with cold thoughts. We walked to the stairwell instead of the car. Footsteps echoed above us. 2 sets, then a third set from below. The lawyer stopped. He looked at my child, then at me. He said, calm as rain, left door. We pushed through a fire door and stepped into a narrow loading passage that fed out to a street behind the annex. A delivery truck blocked most of the view. The driver smoked and paid us no mind. We slipped past the bumper and into open air. A horn blared. A black SUV turned the corner too tight and skidded. The window rolled down. Harris sat behind the wheel with eyes like a closed fist. He saw the 3 of us together and smiled without showing teeth. Get in, he said through the open window. I stepped in front of my child and felt the tremor in my legs steady into something like steel. The lawyer shifted his stance so his body covered our line. Harris reached down with one hand. When his hand came back up, it held a badge. He lifted it into the light and spoke slow so the street could hear. You are obstructing an officer. I raised my chin and spoke loud enough for the driver of the delivery truck to hear. Then arrest me here, on this street, with witnesses. Harris lowered the badge and lifted a phone. He held the screen so we could see. The live feed from the annex cell filled the glass. A timer blinked red in the corner. 14 minutes. The word sanitize flashed in a small banner at the bottom. If I tap this, he said, logs appear that put your child back in that bed. The system will wash the room. The tape will say it never held a living person. You will go home with a story no one will hear. The lawyer spoke before I could. You cannot press that button if we hold a copy of your stash. Harris blinked. Just once. I saw the surprise and felt my chest open a sliver. The lawyer reached into his coat and lifted his phone again, screen off. He spoke as if we were all old friends. City records, archive, storage unit, corkboard, keycard logs, pictures of you, names of your friends, copies on 2 drives, one with a clerk who hates you, one with a reporter who hates all of you. Harris studied his face, then mine, then my child's. The SUV idled. The delivery driver flicked his ash and watched. A cyclist rolled by and cursed at the noise. The city kept moving as if none of this mattered. Harris set the phone in the cup holder. He leaned across the passenger seat and opened the door. You have 1 hour, he said. You think you can win. Try. But when the hour ends, phones wake, systems wake, and the river gets busy. Do something real before the water takes this day. He closed the door and drove off. The tires left a thin black line that looked like a sentence. We stood in the fumes. The lawyer placed a hand on my shoulder. My child put a hand on my wrist. 3 pulses lined up for a breath. I said one word that moved all 3 of us at once. Court. Word count. 1093. You said, 7. ChatGPT said. Chapter 7. The hearing. Word count is almost equal to 1060. The courtroom smelled of varnish and nerves. The judge had not arrived yet, but the crowd already sat in neat rows, waiting for blood or redemption. My lawyer whispered case codes under his breath. My child sat between 2 guards, wrists free now, but hands folded like they still remembered the cuffs. The prosecutor began with the kind of voice that makes truth sound optional. He painted my child as a genius turned traitor, a mind too sharp to stay honest. Every number, every transfer, every file taken from Orion Tech became a blade. The words cut clean and left no visible wound. When the lawyer rose, he carried no notes. This case is not about theft, he said. It is about who built the trap. He looked toward the gallery. Harris was there, wearing a new badge, face unreadable. The lawyer called him first. Detective, tell the court how you found the flash drive. Harris smiled. Anonymous tip. And you followed procedure? Always. Yet the drive was never entered into chain of custody until you delivered it yourself. It was a long night. The lawyer paced once. You are left-handed? Yes. He lifted a copy of the note from my kitchen table. So is whoever wrote this. Harris leaned forward. Are you accusing me of writing threats? I am showing the court that the same hand that planted evidence also signed warrants. The judge cut in. Counsel, facts only. Facts are exactly what we intend to show. He turned to the bench clerk and requested a screen. The projector flickered, showing the frame from the loading dock camera, Harris guiding a figure in cuffs toward the van. The clerk froze it on the signature page. The handwriting matched the note perfectly. A murmur ran through the room. The prosecutor objected. The judge allowed it. Continue. The lawyer called me next. My legs felt heavy as I walked to the stand. He asked simple questions first: name, relation, age. Then the hard one: what did you find in your home the morning after your son's arrest? A note, I said. It said if I did not return what I took, the next arrest would not be him. And whose handwriting was that? Harris's. The prosecutor rose again. Objection. The witness is not a handwriting expert. The lawyer replied. Neither was Harris when he forged a warrant. The judge let it stand. My pulse hammered in my ears. Harris watched me without blinking. Then came the twist I had not seen coming. The clerk from the annex stepped forward with a sealed envelope. Your Honor, new evidence surfaced in the detention logs. The judge nodded for her to continue. She opened the file and read aloud. Cell 4 sanitized at 1400 per standing order from Harris. Body disposed as unidentified. The room erupted. My child turned pale. The judge slammed the gavel. Order. The lawyer seized the moment. That order was issued while the defendant sat in this courtroom. How does a dead suspect sign attendance? The prosecutor had no answer. He whispered to an aide and sat down hard. The judge looked at Harris. Detective, approach. Harris walked to the bench. His confidence cracked at the edges. Your Honor, there must be a mix-up. The clerk handed him the printed log. The color drained from his face. This is falsified. Then who falsified it? The judge asked. No reply. The bailiff stepped forward, waiting for a signal. The judge's voice was flat. Detective Harris, you are under investigation for obstruction, falsification of records, and kidnapping. Harris opened his mouth, but before he could speak, a sound split the room, a sharp pop like a blown fuse. Smoke rolled from the projector cart. The lights dimmed. Someone shouted, "Gun!" and chaos scattered the benches. I dropped to the floor and pulled my child down with me. Another pop, louder, and glass rained from the upper window. When the smoke cleared, Harris was gone. The bailiff found the side door open, hinges bent. The judge adjourned the session and ordered lockdown. The lawyer pulled me and my child into a side hallway. He will not run far, he said. He left a trail the size of the courthouse. But I knew better. Harris did not run. He reset the board. By nightfall, the news had broken. Detective Harris missing, warrant issued. The city called it corruption. I called it unfinished business. We spent the night at the lawyer's office. My child lay on the couch, eyes open, whispering half-sentences about the van, the basement, the questions Harris had asked before the transfer. He wanted passwords, lists, the original buyer inside Orion who had ordered the leak. He was not after money. He was after silence. At dawn, the lawyer's phone buzzed. He read the message, then passed it to me. Meet where it started. We drove to the docks. The warehouse door hung open. Inside, dust floated through shafts of gray light. On the table sat a folder marked E12 Final. Inside were photos of Harris with Orion executives, each smiling for the camera like friends at a party. In the corner of the last photo, a small reflection showed my own mailbox, my house in the frame of their victory shot. I understood then. Harris had been in my life long before the arrest. He had chosen my child because of me. I had once testified against an Orion contractor years ago, back when the company still used government grants. The old enemies had simply waited for a new generation to punish. I felt the air go thin. He came for me, I said. Not for him. The lawyer nodded. Then we end it with you. We gathered the files, every printout, every photo. The lawyer drafted a motion for emergency evidence disclosure, sent copies to 3 media outlets, and hand-delivered one to the judge's clerk. Transparency was the only shield left. 2 hours later, the courthouse released an order placing my child under witness protection until trial. The prosecutor withdrew half the charges. Orion Tech's board resigned in the afternoon. The stock collapsed by evening. But Harris was still out there. That night, I stood by the river where the van had vanished. The water moved slow, carrying bits of paper and light. A shape floated near the bank, an empty badge case. Inside, a card. Not Harris's name. A single word printed where his picture should be, division. The lawyer read it and said, he was never alone. The wind lifted off the water and pushed against my face. I thought of everything that had cracked and everything that had survived. My child leaned against the railing, free hands gripping metal like it might hold them up. Is it over? They asked. No, I said. But for the first time, it is ours to finish. The courthouse bell struck once, sharp and clean. Somewhere behind us, cameras kept rolling, stories kept spreading, and a system built on silence learned the sound of a parent who refused to stop speaking. End of chapter 7 is almost equal to 1060 words. Underscore. Would you like me to continue directly with Chapter 8, The Pact, where the aftermath turns into a strategic battle of evidence leaks, media trials, and the final confrontation with the unseen higher division that controlled Harris? You said? 8 ChatGPT said. Thought for 15 I sat with the files spread across the table and felt the weight of every page. The badge case from the river lay beside my hand. One word on the blank card kept circling my thoughts like a hawk. Division. My child slept on the office couch with a coat over their shoulders, breathing shallow, as if even rest could not drop its guard. The lawyer stood by the window and watched the street like it might answer back. We had pushed the monster into daylight. It shifted shape. We made a pact before sunrise. No blind moves. No secret runs. Every step would leave a paper trail, and a mirror pointed at whoever tried to erase it. The lawyer set 3 rules on a sticky note. 1. Duplicate everything 3 times. 2. Release proof in stages so no single strike could kill the case. 3. Never meet anyone alone, not even friends, not even family. I signed that note like it was a will. The prosecutor called it 8. His voice carried a new edge now that half his case had bled out in public. He wanted cooperation on his terms and credit on the evening news. I said he could have truth and nothing else. He muttered about timing, elections, the office, things that make machines move. I told him my clock was set to a parent's panic, not to his calendar. He swallowed that and agreed to a joint briefing with the judge's clerk present. My child woke with red lines on the wrists and asked for water. I watched them drink in slow sips and thought of the cell door and the camera dome and the timer that had promised to turn life into a rumor. I kept my voice level. I asked for names. The ones above Harris. The ones who wrote orders but never touched door handles. My child stared at the cup and spoke one syllable at a time. A board advisor. A contractor with no fixed address. A shadow group inside Orion that met off books and used law enforcement like a hired hand. Not many names. Enough to pull a thread. The lawyer scheduled 3 releases. First, the photos from the storage unit with Harris at the center of the corkboard web. Second, the docking bay frame with his left-handed signature. Third, the unit log that matched the pen angles on the threat left in my kitchen. The point was not to drown them in files. The point was rhythm. Tap, 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 until the court moved to the beat. At noon, the first photo set landed in the inboxes of 2 reporters known for teeth. 10 minutes later, Orion's public account posted a bland denial. 15 minutes after that, the second release hit, and the denial aged like milk. The market curled at the edges. I did not celebrate. Noise does not equal truth. When we reached the courthouse, the clerk escorted us through a side corridor to a room with high windows and low patience. The prosecutor had his team lined along the wall. The judge's clerk sat with a recorder and a pen that never lifted. The prosecutor wanted a clean statement from my child in exchange for full immunity. The lawyer said he wanted a formal proffer, not a handshake. The room tightened. My child looked at me. I nodded once. We were not here to barter breath. We were here to land a strike that could not be undone. My child spoke about the first contact. A supposed recruiter from a partner security firm who knew grades, passwords, daily routes, the color of the car. They offered cash and a promise that this was not theft, just testing system gaps. Then came the briefcase nights, the coded messages, the lists that were not lists but keys to unlock other lists. Every time my child tried to step away, another piece of my life was placed on the table like a chip. Old testimony I gave years ago, my photo pulled from a family album, the view from our living room window at dusk. They did not just buy compliance. They bought fear. When the clerk stopped the recorder, the prosecutor leaned back and studied my child as if measuring distance to the edge of a cliff. He said witness protection would move fast and deep. He said no contact outside counsel. He said safety first. I believed the rules, not the promises. I had learned the hard way who writes the fine print. On the steps outside, Cameras waited like gulls. The lawyer shielded my child and led us down a side ramp. A man in a gray coat broke from the crowd and slid a note into my palm with the smoothness of an old habit. He did not look at me. He kept walking. I opened the fold. 2 words, Pier 7. Under it, a time. The lawyer read it and did not blink. He wants you alone, he said. I do not go alone, I replied. Not quite, he said, and lifted a small pouch from his bag. Inside lay a pin with a mic no larger than a freckle and a piece of clear tape with a grain-sized tracker. He placed the pin at the edge of my collar and pressed the tape to the inside of my sleeve. He set his phone to log location every 5 seconds. He looked at me like a surgeon looks before cutting. You do not chase. You stay where the light is. If he pulls you away from people, you turn back. If he flashes a badge, you ask the nearest stranger to film. My child touched my hand. I can go instead, they said. You already went farther than you should, I answered. I carry this one. I reached the pier with the sun sliding lower, turning the water into a metal sheet. Fishermen sat with lines in the tide. A couple posed with a phone. An old man fed gulls. The world pretended not to notice the line humming under it. He appeared from behind a stack of traps. Not Harris. Older, cleaner. A face trained to hold no expression. He stopped at a safe distance and spoke like we were neighbors arguing about a fence. He said division did not make mistakes, it managed risks. He said I had become a risk. He said he could make the case vanish if I signed a statement saying my child acted alone. He said his office would move to dismiss all matters related to state actors. He offered nothing on Harris. He offered nothing on Orion. He offered peace at the cost of truth. I kept my hands in sight. Show me proof you can do what you promise. He smiled the way a person smiles when they think they are the only adult in a room. He showed me my own phone screen mirrored on his device. Texts, calls, the motel address from the night we ran. He scrolled to the photo of the storage unit board and tapped it like it bored him. Then he lifted a small black remote and clicked. Across the river, a warehouse sign buzzed and died. The timing was theater, but the message landed. He had reach. I asked for Harris. He said Harris was a tool that outlived its use. He said tools are replaced. He said division had no face to put on a stand, only outcomes. He wanted my signature more than my belief. He pulled a document from a thin folder and held out a pen. I felt the mic on my collar like a brand. I raised my voice half an inch. You want the parent, not the child. You picked the child because of the parent. You used a badge to dress crime as order. He glanced at the fisherman, the couple, the old man with the gulls, and then at the phone in my pocket. He saw my eyes flick and understood. He slid the pen back into the folder and stepped closer, not close enough to touch, close enough to chill. You think the press saves you, he said. Press eats story, not danger. When the story moves on, danger stays. Sign now. Walk home. Watch your child grow old. Or keep fighting and watch your child grow careful. A gull shrieked and dropped to the rail. I thought of the cell. I thought of the timer. I thought of the way my child said water like it was medicine. I met his eyes and said no. He did not argue. He nodded once, the smallest show of respect I would ever get from him. Then he walked to the end of the pier and vanished down the ladder to a boat waiting under the planks. The lawyer's car pulled up 2 minutes later. He had tracked the dot to the pier and watched from the road with the engine running. My child sat in the back seat, pale but upright. I climbed in and told them what was offered and what I said. The lawyer exhaled like someone had been holding his ribs. We filed an emergency motion that night asking the court to freeze all state contacts tied to Orion. We attached the audio from the pin. We sent a copy to the clerk, another to the reporter with teeth, and a third to a judge known for waking at dawn to read. Near midnight, my phone buzzed with a single message from an unknown number. Not words. A photo. The same badge case from the river, face up on a table I recognized as my kitchen table. Under it, a short line of block letters that had once sat in my house as a threat. Bring your child to the courthouse at 9. Come alone, or the next file I burn will carry your name. I stared at the screen until the letters swam. My child read over my shoulder and put a hand on my arm. The lawyer already had his coat on. He looked at the clock, then at us, and nodded. We made a second pact before sleep could touch us. We would go at 9. We would not go alone. We would not walk into the trap. We would bring the trap with us. I shut off the lamp and listened to the building settle. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed and faded. Somewhere on a desk sat a badge with no name and a file with mine. I lay awake and counted each breath until the room turned gray. Morning would not forgive mistakes. Word count, 1,130. You said, 9 ChatGPT said. Chapter 9. The Stand. Word count is almost equal to 1,110. Morning came without color. The courthouse sat under a sky the shade of wet concrete. Every step toward the doors felt like walking into a throat that would not swallow. My child moved beside me, head down under a hood. The lawyer a pace behind, carrying the single folder that still mattered, the copy of everything Division wanted buried. Inside, the air buzzed with fluorescent hum. Reporters lined the corridor, cameras blinking like insects. The judge had ordered a closed hearing, but rumors leak faster than truth. We passed through the scanner, metal trays clattering, belts unbuckled, pockets emptied. Nothing ordinary about it except how ordinary it looked. In the small chamber beyond the main hall, the clerk waited with a clipboard. She looked nervous. Her pen shook against the paper. The division representative has requested a private deposition before the full session, she said. Her voice was careful. Your lawyer may stay. No recording devices. The lawyer's jaw tightened. Then they will bring theirs, he said. He turned to me. Stay behind me. Let me talk first. The side door opened. Harris walked in. Same coat, new badge. The cut above his eyebrow told me the last week had not gone smoothly for him. He set a plain envelope on the table and said nothing. The lawyer broke the silence. You vanished during a hearing under oath. That alone can bury you. Harris slid the envelope across the table. Before you bury anyone, read that. Inside were 8 photographs, boardrooms, dinners, handshakes. Every face but one was blackbarred. The unblurred one was mine. A conference from a decade earlier, back when Orion still called itself a government partner. I was in the background giving testimony on budget misuse. Harris tapped the photo. You testified. You cost them millions. They built Division to make sure that never happened again. He looked older now, voice flat. I was told it was national security. Then I learned what they were really securing. The lawyer leaned in. You want a deal? I want survival, Harris said. You leak those files, Division closes every hole with fire. People disappear. But if I testify, the structure cracks from the inside. I can give you names, accounts, transfer routes. You give me protection. My child's voice cut the air. Protection from who? Your own masters? Harris looked at them for the first time. From everyone. The lawyer did not blink. You testify live. No sealed record. We call press and court at the same time. Once your mouth opens, you cannot be erased quietly. Harris nodded once. I talked today, but we start with the judge, not the cameras. The clerk escorted us to the chamber. The judge sat already, reading a motion. When she saw Harris, her expression did not change. Detective, I hope you intend to answer for your last appearance. Harris placed a flash drive on the desk. Evidence, Your Honor. Financial routes connecting Orion shell accounts to division budgets. The prosecutor objected before she could touch it. Chain of custody compromised. The lawyer countered. So was justice. The judge waved both down. Admit it provisionally. The screen lit with spreadsheets, routing slips, transfers tagged with initials that matched half the city's administrative board. At the bottom, a line of approval signatures, all stamped by one authorization key. The key belonged to the Deputy Attorney General. The judge leaned back. Her voice lost polish. That key is mine, she said quietly. Then she looked at the clerk. Seal this room. Now. Doors closed. Guard stepped outside. The judge stood. You have 5 minutes to decide how much of this goes public before the system does it for you. The prosecutor paled. This is federal, she cut him off. It is criminal. Harris stepped forward. They will come for me first. The lawyer turned to the clerk. Stream this feed to the secondary court archive. The one tied to public access. Password lock in 10 minutes. After that, automatic release. The clerk's hands trembled but obeyed. A red light blinked on the recorder. Every word after that was history with a pulse. Harris named them. Directors, financiers, false auditors. Each name heavier than the last. When he said the deputies, the judge's face froze between duty and disbelief. He stopped only when his voice cracked. Then he looked at me. They used you, he said. They used your child. They used me. That is what division is, a machine that grinds names into silence. The judge nodded once. Not today. She ordered immediate warrants, emergency custody of Orion's digital assets, and protective detail for every witness in the room. The prosecutor protested. She silenced him with a glare that could cut steel. Then the lights flickered again. Power dipped. The lawyer cursed under his breath. A low hum filled the vents, the same pitch I remembered from the courthouse blackout weeks ago. The judge shouted for backup power. Nothing came. Harris grabbed the flash drive off the table. Backup system is theirs, he said. They are burning it. We ran. Through side halls, down staircases that smelled of dust and panic. Behind us the alarm howled. Smoke seeped from vents, paper burning somewhere deep. The lawyer pulled us into a maintenance tunnel that emptied near the archives wing. He slammed the door and bolted it with a metal rod. Fire suppression will kick in, he said. Water. We waited out. Through the grate we saw officers rushing, files flying, sprinklers coughing to life. The whole courthouse breathing steam. When the all-clear finally sounded, we climbed back up. Half the building was soaked. But the recorder in the judge's chamber still blinked red. The stream had gone live before the system crash. By the time they cut the feed, half the city had watched Harris name his masters. Outside, the crowd had doubled. Reporters shouted. The judge walked out drenched, robe clinging to her shoulders, and faced the microphones herself. Every document you saw was real, she said. Every name will face indictment. She turned to me. Your testimony continues tomorrow. Bring your courage again. That night, in the motel, we watched the replay on a borrowed tablet. Harris's voice echoed through bad speakers, calm, resigned. When it ended, my child asked, will they stop now? The lawyer said, no, but they will have to hide smaller. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the glow of the screen fading to black. The city outside hummed with sirens and relief. Somewhere, Division cracked its shell and started to crawl into another one. But for now, the courtroom still stood, the files still streamed, and truth, ugly, wet, alive, had not been erased. End of chapter 9 is almost equal to 110 words. Would you like me to continue with chapter 10, The Reckoning, where Harris's fate collides with the system he exposed and the parent faces the final moral decision between justice and revenge? You said, 10 ChatGPT said, I did not sleep. I kept the tablet on the nightstand and rewound the moment the judge said every name would face indictment. I watched Harris say those names again, steady as if he had been practicing in a mirror for years. Dawn bled through the cheap curtains. The lawyer brewed coffee that tasted like burned paper. My child sat at the edge of the bed tying and untying a shoelace until the lace turned flat. The phone buzzed at 6:11 a.m. unknown number. I let it ring twice, then answered. A woman spoke without greeting. She said the deputy had resigned. She said the office would deny the stream. She said Division would move the case to a place where doors do not open. Then she offered a deal in a voice with no air in it. Immunity for my child if I withdrew my testimony and surrendered every copy of the files. She finished with my address from 10 years ago, my old car's plate, my late spouse's initials. She wanted me to understand reach more than mercy. I set the phone down and looked at the lawyer. He had heard every word from across the room. He shook his head once. My child stared at the floor and spoke so quietly I almost missed it. Do not fold. We reached the courthouse early. The air smelled like wet stone from the sprinklers that had drowned half the building. Harris arrived under guard, hands empty, face drawn. He looked smaller, like a man walking in shoes that were not his. Cameras waited at the steps. Reporters shouted questions about the key that signed the transfers. He said nothing. When we passed him in the corridor, he glanced at me. Just one flicker, the smallest request for something that was not forgiveness. I felt anger rise, then fall, like a wave that breaks and slides back into the ocean. The clerk led us to a secured room. The judge entered with hair still damp from the chaos of yesterday. She spoke without ceremony. The stream had gone wide enough to make the city hum. Federal investigators were on site. Witness protection would move my child after the session. She asked if I was ready to take the stand again. I said yes. A parent learns to turn pain into sentences. The prosecutor came in with 2 assistants and a stack of folders that looked thinner than truth. He started with my history, the old testimony that cost Orion their grants. He tried to paint me as a bitter speaker of old grudges. I told him I had nothing left to hold but a child and a name, and that both had been dragged across concrete by people who wore badges like permission slips. The judge said to stick to facts. I kept my voice even and my sentences short. I described the note on my kitchen table, the left-handed signature on the dock log, the van with covered plates, the annex cell with a camera that hummed like a fly at a window. When the prosecutor tried to pull me into motives, the lawyer rose and cut him off with an objection that landed like a door slamming. Then the defense screen flickered to life again with a new set of transfers, this time routed through a charity that fed uniforms to police cadets. The authorization key matched the stream from yesterday. The clerk read the checksum codes aloud for the record. The judge stared at the numbers like she was trying to remember where she had seen them before. The answer lived in her own office. Her shoulders tightened. She ordered a recess so the court network could quarantine every server with that key stamped into it. We stepped into the hall. The lawyer leaned close and spoke into my shoulder so the walls could not read his lips. Harris has not told everything. He kept one map in his pocket. That map points to the person above the deputy. He will sell that map if he feels the floor tilt under him. You will have to decide if you let him hold that card or take it now. The choice sat in my mouth like a coin. Harris had kidnapped my child, forged a warrant, and tried to turn a cell into a grave. He had broken laws and bones made of trust. He had also cracked the seal on division. If he fell today without giving up the last key, the door might shut again with all of us on the wrong side. We walked to the witness room. A marshal stood by the door, hand on a holster out of habit more than threat. He let us in. Harris sat at the small table, wrists free, guard at his back. He did not look up. The lawyer closed the door and took the seat opposite. He spoke plain. You will hand over the last route, or the court will cut you loose to the slow grind of cells you cannot sanitize. Harris lifted his eyes, and I saw a man who had stopped believing in rescue, not a villain who thought himself above gravity. He said the route lives on a dead drop and opens only if two codes meet in the same spot. One code sits in his head. The other sits in a place that does not forgive mistakes. I asked where. He said the only place no one searched. A courthouse locker under a false name with a lock that opens to a song, not a number. He hummed the notes, low and steady. I did not recognize the tune at first. My child did. It was the lullaby I used to hum when storms rolled in and sleep would not come. Harris held my stare and did not blink. They recorded you years ago, he said. They used your voice to carry keys across rooms. They taught me to listen. I felt cold climb my spine. The old conference. The microphone that picked up a parent's voice while testifying about budgets. A song slipped into a file that would follow my name for years. Division had turned a lullaby into a lock. The lawyer told the marshal to fetch the locker list. The marshal left and returned with a roll of tags. One name stood out because it did not belong to any case on the docket. Cole Lee. My child went still. The alias we had found on a passport in my house. The name that had worn my child's face. The lawyer said nothing. He just moved. We reached the locker wing. The lights buzzed. The air felt colder than the rest of the building, as if metal had a climate. Harris walked between two guards, looking straight ahead. The lawyer found the locker with the false name and pressed his ear to the door. He hummed a single note. It came back a faint echo, the kind old tunnels make. He nodded to me. I finished the song. The lock clicked. Metal surrendered. Inside sat a thin black binder and a small device like a garage opener. The binder held routing slips that did not bother with masks. Names. Accounts. A page marked Division Pension Fund with an arrow to a Cayman bank that fed cash back into special task lines signed by the deputy. At the bottom, a single page with instructions on how to reset every badge in the annex wing to erase footage on command. The device in my palm matched the one Harris had held in the SUV when he had tried to turn my child back into a ghost. My hand shook as I set it down. Footsteps came fast from the end of the hall. Not guards. Shoes that had never learned to run. The deputy turned the corner with two aides and no expression. He said to hand over the binder as if he were asking for a pen. The guards lifted hands. The aides pulled papers. The marshal raised his voice. The world crowded into a space meant for coats and lunch bags. I stepped forward and held the binder tight. I spoke loud enough for the security camera at the corner to hear. You will wait for the judge. The deputy smiled without heat. He told the marshal to arrest me for tampering with evidence. The marshal did not move. The lawyer turned his phone screen to face the camera and hit a single large button. Live. The red dot glowed. The hall became a stage. The deputy understood too late. He lowered his hand and tried to step back. Harris blocked him with one arm and placed the other on the binder like a man who had decided where he would stand until a tide took him. Sirens screamed outside the building again. The judge appeared in the doorway with 2 federal agents and a look that did not bend. She asked the deputy why files bearing his key number lived in a locker under a false name taken from a forged passport. He did not answer. He reached for the binder in a last reflex of power. The federal agent gripped his wrist. The deputy said a phrase about national security that had been used to hide too many crimes. The judge said one word that turned the corridor hard. Arrested. The agents cuffed him. Cameras saw it. The building breathed. I expected relief to fill the space. It did not. Relief is not a flood. It is a drip. It needs time. Time kept moving with its own slow hands. We walked Harris back toward the chamber. He stopped at the bend in the hall and looked at me. You could have let me fall, he said. You did not. I said I wanted every lock open and every key named. He nodded, as if that answer weighed the same as grace. We rounded the corner. A shot cracked the air from somewhere beyond the atrium. Glass shattered. People shouted. A second shot followed, duller, closer. The guard shoved Harris behind a pillar and drew. The lawyer pulled my child against the wall and covered them with both arms. I scanned the balcony and saw a flash behind a marble bust. Another flash. The second shot bit into the marble. Dust fell. I moved without thinking and dragged Harris to the floor behind a bench. He flinched and pressed a hand to his side. Red seeped between his fingers. Not a deep wound, but enough to stain. The judge yelled for lockdown. The agents sprinted toward the stairs. The shooter vanished behind the column and left a black cap tumbling on the marble like a small piece of night with no owner. The alarm howled again. Doors sealed. People dropped and crawled. My child gripped my sleeve so tight it hurt. The lawyer whispered that we would be moved to a secure room in 30 seconds. I looked at Harris holding pressure on his own life and felt something I had not expected. Pity for a man who had been a tool and knew it. We were rushed down the service hall. On the floor by the exit lay a folded note, clean, unstepped, as if placed between breaths. I picked it up as we ran. For words in neat block letters that I would know anywhere. Next time, no misses. I did not stop. I kept moving until concrete walls closed around us and locks turned with sounds that felt like anchors dropping in deep water. I handed the note to the lawyer. He read it and handed it to the judge. She looked at me and saw what I knew. Division still had hands. The reckoning had begun, not ended. Word count, 1,164. You said, 11. ChatGPT said, Chapter 11. The verdict, word count, is almost equal to 1/100. They moved us through the service hall with guards on both sides. The note with those 4 words, next time, no misses, sat folded in the lawyer's pocket. No one spoke until we reached the elevator that led back to the secure chambers. The judge ordered that the session continue despite the attack. Justice does not pause for aimless bullets, she said. Her voice was calm, but every syllable cut like ice. Inside the courtroom, the smell of gunpowder still lingered. The benches creaked under the weight of people who had returned only because they needed to see how far truth would crawl before it stopped breathing. My child sat at the defense table again, pale but upright. Harris sat behind us, wound-wrapped, a guard posted at his shoulder. The deputy had been removed. The headlines outside had already called it the Division scandal. The judge began with a statement. Evidence presented across the last sessions has established systemic corruption tied to Orion Technologies and government oversight units operating under the name Division. We will conclude this phase today. The prosecutor asked for permission to read closing remarks. The judge granted it. He spoke about trust and duty and how the state must punish betrayal, his voice brittle, the sound of someone defending a sinking structure. When he finished, the lawyer rose. He said nothing about law. He spoke instead about the parent sitting beside him. When power turns on the people it is sworn to protect, courage is not loud. It is persistent. This parent did not bring vengeance to this court. They brought truth, one file at a time, against a wall built from silence. That is the only justice left when the system forgets what it is for. The judge nodded. Call your last witness. The lawyer called my child. They stood slowly, walked to the stand, and swore the oath. Their hands did not shake. They looked straight at the judge. I did what I was told because I was told it would save my parent, they said. Every lie began with fear, and every order came from someone wearing authority like armor. Harris told me that one mistake could erase us both. He was right about the mistake, wrong about who would be erased. The courtroom stayed silent long enough for the air to hum. The judge's pen hovered above her notes, then dropped. "Thank you," she said softly. "You may sit." Harris asked to speak. The lawyer started to object, then stopped. The judge gave him a slow nod. Harris stood with both hands pressed to the table. "Division was built to control noise," he said. "They forgot that silence carries farther. What you saw here is only what leaked through cracks. There will be others. Do not trust uniforms. Trust paper trails. They do not lie." The judge looked down at her bench. "You are prepared to face sentencing?" He nodded once. "Yes, Your Honor. I will take what I earned." She turned to the clerk. "Record this as voluntary confession. Sentence to follow after federal review." Then she faced me. "Do you wish to make a statement before I deliver the verdict for your child?" I rose. "Only this," I said. "My child did wrong out of fear. I did wrong out of silence. We will live with both. But silence is finished." The judge exhaled. "Then let us finish it." She read the verdict herself, slow enough for each word to land. On the charge of data theft, not guilty. On the charge of conspiracy, dismissed. On the charge of obstruction, time served. This court recognizes cooperation and evidence provided as decisive in dismantling the organization known as Division. Case closed. The gavel struck once. The sound hit like thunder in a sealed room. My child closed their eyes, the kind of shut that means release, not rest. Harris bowed his head. The lawyer allowed himself a single, tired smile. Outside, the steps overflowed with people. Reporters, officers, bystanders, all shouting different questions that meant the same thing. "What now?" The lawyer answered none. He simply handed the clerk a packet, final filings, copies of the files we had risked everything to keep alive. He whispered, "Public record," and walked away before anyone could stop him. We stepped into the daylight. Flashbulbs popped. I held my child's hand. The air smelled of rain, though the sky was clear. Across the street, a van door closed quietly. A man in a gray coat stood beside it, watching. He did not raise a weapon. He only lifted 2 fingers in a small salute. Division was fractured, not dead. I nodded once so he would know I understood. The lawyer drove us out of the city to a safe house on the edge of the old industrial belt. The house looked abandoned from the road but had a new lock and fresh paint inside. He said protection would begin tonight, new names ready if we wanted them. I looked at my child. They said they were done hiding. The lawyer smiled without humor. "Then start with living." At dusk we sat on the porch. The horizon burned orange and gray. I asked what freedom felt like. My child said it felt like breathing without permission. I watched the last light fade and wondered if that was all any of this had ever been about: air. The phone in the lawyer's coat rang. He answered, listened, and handed it to me. A voice I did not know said, "The judge has vanished. No note. No trace." The line went dead. The lawyer looked at me, then at the road stretching west. "They are cleaning what is left," he said. "Division will change names again." I stared at the phone, at the dark screen that held too many ghosts, and whispered, "Then we keep naming them." We stayed silent for a long time. Somewhere far off, a siren rose and fell. My child leaned against my shoulder. The lawyer lit the porch lamp and said the city would sleep tonight thinking justice had won. Tomorrow would prove whether justice could stay awake. I closed my eyes and heard the echo of the gavel again. It did not sound like an ending. It sounded like a heartbeat. End of chapter 11 is almost equal to 100 words. Would you like me to move straight into chapter 12, the aftermath, the closing chapter that ties the moral arc, the emotional reconciliation, and the lasting shadow of division into one cinematic conclusion? You said, 12. ChatGPT said, chapter 12, the aftermath. Word count is almost equal to 140. I watched the porch lamp throw a pale ring on the steps and thought about everything that ring could not touch. The judge had vanished. The city cheered and then fell quiet. Reporters packed their vans. Headlines cooled. I felt the old house breathe around us like a tired animal that had survived a storm and did not yet trust the sky. The lawyer spoke first. He said we had to move for a while. He said eyes were still on us, and some of those eyes wore smiles in daylight and knives at night. My child did not look away. They said they wanted a real name on a real mailbox, even if the street changed. The lawyer said there are places where new names sound like old ones if you say them with enough conviction. I nodded. I did not care what the letters said on the box as long as the person beside me kept breathing. We left before dawn. The road ran flat and quiet, a clean line through fields that did not ask questions. My child slept with a blanket over their shoulders and the soft rise and fall of someone who had earned 8 hours for the first time in months. I drove and thought about the first night I heard the whisper in the hall, the glow of a phone against a face I loved, the sound of cuffs on bone, the click of locks that thought they could make truth forget its own name. By noon we reached a town that hid behind its own modesty, a diner with chipped mugs, a library with a bell above the door, a two-room place to rent with a window that looked over a small square where pigeons jumped like they had somewhere to be. We took it for a month. The landlord asked for nothing but cash and a promise not to break the sink. I gave both. The first night there, I sat on the floor and opened the final copies we kept hidden inside a cereal box that would fool no one who knew where to look. The lawyer had labeled each folder with a number instead of a name. 1 to 5. 1 was the testimony stream. 2 was the storage unit photos. 3 was the locker binder. 4 was a scan of the annex logs with the false sanitization order. 5 was a short file my child wrote in their own hand, a plain account of how fear can teach a person to trade daylight for shadow. I added one more page. I wrote it slow. I did not try to sound brave or wise. I wrote about the way a parent learns to hear a change in footsteps long before a courtroom learns to hear an oath. I wrote that love is not soft when it fights. It is sharp and patient. It gathers proof and keeps walking when the corridors fill with smoke. Days passed without sirens. The lawyer checked in from pay phones and borrowed offices. He said the deputy had started to name people who had once praised him at dinners. He said Harris had agreed to long years under guard, and that he filled the hours by writing every small procedure he had seen division use, line by line, until each line lay like a wire that could no longer trip a person who walked carefully. He said the judge had not been found. He did not add the word that haunted that sentence. My child did not ask for it either. Some words do more damage than silence. On the 7th morning, a letter reached our box. No return address. Inside, a single photograph. The judge stood in a rural square, head bare, hair loose, wearing plain clothes that did not look like hers. She faced the camera with a look that said the picture had been taken with permission. On the back, a line written with the clear block hand that once left a thread on my table. I read it twice. Stable for now. Trust paper, not faces. No signature, but I did not need one. A person can change sides without changing hands. I took the photo to the lawyer. He studied the fibers and the ink like a surgeon studies tissue. He said it came from a small-town print shop 2 states over. He said we would not chase it. He said the only way to keep a person safe in a world like this is to let them turn into a rumor that does not hurt anyone. I slid the photo into folder 6. I had made it up on the spot. A folder for proof that people can walk away from machines. My child started to rebuild life in pieces. They found work that asked for patience more than permission. They handled old books at the library and filed cards no one read and greeted strangers who brought in stories longer than any index could contain. They stopped counting the lines on their wrists. They started counting the number of times a day they forgot to flinch when a door opened behind them. I kept a tally too. The number rose. One afternoon we sat on a bench in the square and shared an orange. A boy on a bicycle rode past and almost hit a pigeon that did not care about laws of motion. He laughed and circled back and missed again. My child smiled in a way I had not seen since before the warehouse and the van and the cell with the camera that hummed. I felt something in my chest loosen. It was not triumph. It was permission to breathe like a person, not a witness. The lawyer brought one last envelope to our door before he vanished back into the mess that made his work. Inside were 2 documents. The first said witness protection remained available anytime we asked. The second was a simple deed transfer with a blank line. A small rundown house near a trail where old trees arched over a narrow path. He said the title could hold any name we chose. He said nothing about cost. I knew there was a number somewhere, and I knew he had already paid it. We drove out to see it. The place needed everything. Paint, glass, love. I walked from room to room and placed my palm on each wall like a doctor listening for hidden sounds. The walls said they could learn our names if we spoke to them long enough. My child stepped onto the back stoop and looked at the line of trees. They asked if we could plant something that would outlive both of us. I said yes. We dug a small circle and set a sapling into earth that had not been moved in many years. The roots looked like thin hands trying to remember how to hold on. I covered them with soil and promised to water them even when skies forgot. Promises are heavier when you make them to things that cannot answer. News still found us. Orion broke into pieces. Some parts sold to groups with new names. Some parts sank. A few faces went to cells with real locks. A few faces left on planes that did not appear on public schedules. The deputy's trial date slid on calendars that did not keep the hours of ordinary people. Harris wrote, and his pages were dull, which meant they might save someone later. He did not ask for forgiveness in any line. He did not deserve it from me. What he deserved was exactly what he got. Time to remember every order he had obeyed, and every time he could have said no and did not. I wrote, too. Not court pages. Not statements. I wrote letters to the person I used to be, the one who believed that silence was a way to keep peace inside a house. I told that person that silence is a kind of debt that charges interest until it burns down the room. I wrote letters to the person I would be years from now, the one who would sit under a grown tree and hear wind where there had been sirens. I told that person to forgive without forgetting and to hold a line between love and blindness, and to teach anyone who would listen that the first lie you catch in your own home is not small. It is the key that opens a door you cannot close alone. On the last evening of that month, we stood by the sapling with a watering can and a small wooden tag. My child wrote one word on it with a marker that bled into the grain. Boundaries. We hung it with a string. We did not speak for a long time. The tree did not care. It only asked for water and for seasons to keep their promise. Night settled. Fireflies woke along the trail like tiny signals that did not have a place on a network map. The lawyer called to say a new hearing had set a date for the deputy. He said the judge had not returned and might never. He said the court now used double recorders that wrote to two places at once and that the clerk smiled when she powered them on. He said the city still held its breath but had not fainted. He said it was enough for now. I closed the phone and looked at my child. Their face had lines that had not been there before, but the eyes had learned how to stay still without going dull. I asked what they wanted to do with the rest of their life. They said they wanted to tell people when to stop before someone who wears a badge for the wrong reason tells them for you. I said that sounded like a way to build something that did not need foundations made of fear. I returned to the porch and picked up the folder with the last copy. I walked to the old shed and found a tin box with a rusted hinge. I placed the drive inside and buried it under a loose plank. Not because I planned to use it. Because paper trails need anchors that do not beg for applause. When I turned, my child stood in the doorway with a small lamp held high. And for a second the light framed them the way the courthouse lights had framed the judge when she walked into a storm made of smoke and rules. I felt the two images slide over each other and then drift apart. One belonged to a past that would keep nipping at our heels. The other belonged to a present that had learned how to set boundaries and still offer a hand. I sat on the step. The house creaked. The trees made sounds like whispers that did not need to threaten. I spoke into the dark like a person telling a story to a room that might be listening or might be empty. I said that a parent found out a child was living two lives and chose not to let a machine turn either life into ash. I said that the next time a knock comes before dawn, I will open the door with my eyes already open. I said that love is not a shield. It is a set of steps you climb even when the lights fail. If you are still with me, take this and keep it close. Ask hard questions the first time your gut raises its hand. Do not trade quiet for safety. Do not wait for a system to remember you. Be the record that cannot be erased. If you want more stories that tell the truth like this, raw, fast, and real, hit subscribe and stay with me. Or watch the next story on screen now. Make your choice, but do not stay silent.